They say grief makes a man see ghosts, but that day at my mother's funeral, the only ghost I saw was my father. Not dead, not buried, just gone. He wasn't there when they lowered her into the ground. He was 300 miles away, boarding a plane with a woman half his age, laughing like the past never existed. People whispered around me, "He couldn't even show up?" But I didn't need them to say it. I already knew. He'd buried her long before the casket ever closed. That day, I promised myself one thing. I wouldn't cry for the man who skipped my mother's goodbye. I'd make sure he cried for everything he ever took for granted. And as for the woman who called me just a mechanic, she was about to learn what kind of engines I really built. I grew up in a house where my father's laughter filled every corner, loud, commanding, and fake. He was the kind of man who wore his success like a medal and made sure everyone else saw it. My mother used to say he loved his reflection more than he loved either of us. I never believed her, until the night she stopped waiting for him to come home. He was a businessman, polished suits, expensive watches, and the scent of power that lingered long after he left a room. But somewhere between his promotions and his business trips, something rotted inside him. He started staying late, missing dinners, smiling less at Mom and more at his phone. I was 16 when I first saw the message light up. A woman's name, a heart emoji, and words that still echo in my head. "Can't wait to see you again." Mom saw it too. She didn't say a word. She just set the phone down on the kitchen counter, quietly turned off the stove, and went upstairs. That's how heartbreak looks in real life, and no screaming, no throwing plates. Just silence that never leaves. After that night, she faded slowly, like a photo left in the sun. Her smile got weaker, her body thinner, her laughter rarer. When the doctor said the word cancer, I didn't believe it. I thought it was just grief in disguise. Dad came home the night before her first chemo session, not to comfort her, but to tell her he couldn't make it to the hospital. "Work trip," he said. "I'll call." He didn't. Weeks passed. The house grew colder. Bills piled up. The only warmth came from the garage, my escape. That's where I fixed things. Cars, radios, anything with a broken motor. Maybe I was just trying to fix the sound of silence that filled our home. When Mom passed, I thought he'd at least come for the funeral. Even a coward shows up for closure. But that morning, while I stood in a black suit beside her coffin, my phone buzzed. It was a message from one of his business partners. A photo of my father boarding a private plane, hand in hand with a woman in red. The caption read, "Your old man sure moves on fast." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at that coffin and whispered, "You were right, Mom. He really loved his reflection more than you." After the funeral, I left everything behind, the house, the memories, the man who made me hate my own last name. I started over with grease under my nails and anger in my veins. I worked nights fixing engines in a small-town garage, saving every cent, studying finance in secret. People laughed when I said I wanted to build something bigger. They saw a mechanic. I saw blueprints of revenge. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Silence is the loudest form of revenge. While my father built empires out of lies, I built my future one wrench at a time. And one day, those two worlds, his and mine, were going to collide. But what I didn't know then was that the woman he'd left Mom for, the one in red, would walk into my life again years later. Not as my father's mistress, but as the fiancée of the man whose company I secretly owned, and that's when the night truly began. Years passed before I saw her again. By then, The scent of motor oil had become my second skin, and the small garage that once barely paid rent now ran smoother than the cars that came through it. I fixed everything, engines, balance sheets, even my own resentment. Opportunity showed up disguised as grease. A regular client with a broken Mercedes turned out to be the CEO of a mid-level tech firm. He liked my work ethic and the way I talked numbers more than small talk. "Ever thought of investing?" he asked. That single question changed everything. Within 5 years, I'd built quiet stakes in 3 companies. Nothing flashy, always through proxies, silent contracts, clean trails. The world still saw a mechanic, but behind every engine I rebuilt was a bank account whispering freedom. Then came Horizon Motors, a startup with ambition bigger than its funding. Their public face was a charming executive named Richard Kane, the kind of man who smiled for cameras but blinked too slow when telling the truth. I saw potential, not in him, but in the technology they were trying to patent. I invested anonymously through a trust. By year 2, I owned 41%. No one knew. That anonymity would become the stage for everything that followed. It was a summer evening when the ghosts returned. The company threw a lavish investor gala at the Lakeside Grand, a mirror-walled ballroom glittering with money and empty laughter. I wore a simple suit, nothing that screamed wealth. People ignored men who didn't sparkle. That's how I preferred it. And then I saw her red dress. Same shade I remembered from the funeral photo. The woman who had walked beside my father as my mother was lowered into the ground. Older now, sharper around the eyes, but still wearing that effortless arrogance money buys. My breath hitched, not from longing or hate, but recognition. Life had drawn a perfect circle. She was on the arm of Richard Kane. My father's mistress was now the fiancée of the man whose company I secretly controlled. They passed me without a glance. To them, I was just another guest, another mechanic invited by luck. I smiled into my drink. Fate, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. Days after the gala, I requested a quiet meeting with Horizon's board. I'd never shown my face before, always sending a representative. But this time, I wanted to watch expressions change when they learned who held the strings. When I walked into that glass-walled conference room, conversations halted. The executives recognized me, the mechanic investor. Richard didn't, not yet. I took the seat at the head of the table. "Gentlemen," I said evenly, "effective immediately, I'll be assuming active oversight of Horizon's finances." Richard frowned. "And you are?" I slid a file across the table, ownership papers, transfer of voting rights, the trust seal. "My name's Daniel Cole. I hold controlling interest in this company." The color drained from his face. The silence after was almost musical. By the time the meeting ended, I'd made subtle adjustments. Financial oversight under my direct signature, new auditing, a review of all public engagements. Nothing overtly destructive, just precision-cut authority. That's how revenge works best. Not with shouting, but with calm paperwork. 2 weeks later, the gossip reached me. Richard's glamorous fiancée had started asking questions. Why certain accounts were frozen, why marketing budgets had shifted. She even called me once, though she didn't recognize my voice. "Mr. Cole," she purred over the line, "you seem to have great influence at Horizon. Perhaps we could meet to align our interests?" I agreed to coffee. When she arrived, she didn't recognize me at first. Maybe the years, the better suit, the confidence disguised me. But when I said her name, slowly, deliberately, her smile faltered. "Do I know you?" she asked. I looked her straight in the eye. You knew my father. The cup trembled slightly in her hand. I didn't press further. I just talked business, polite and detached, the way one discusses a weather forecast. Every second of that meeting wasn't about vengeance, it was about control. She left unsettled. I left satisfied, because now she knew that somewhere in the hierarchy she'd built her comfort on, there was a man who remembered everything. That night, I stood on my apartment balcony overlooking the city. Lights blinked like quiet witnesses. I realized revenge didn't need explosions or confrontations. It needed timing. My father had traded loyalty for desire, and she had traded dignity for wealth. Both debts were coming due. I used to believe that closure meant confrontation. Shouting matches, slammed doors, some grand cinematic ending. But as I watched the world around me unfold, I learned something simpler. Real closure is silence that others can't fill. 3 months after that coffee meeting, Horizon Motors began to unravel me quietly, gracefully, like silk coming loose at the edge. Not because of sabotage, because of truth. Every document my father's Mistress and Richard had signed together was built on shortcuts, inflated invoices, shared personal accounts, unreported bonuses. Nothing illegal enough to cause prison, but enough to expose them. And I made sure those truths didn't disappear in the noise of boardrooms. It began with whispers. Internal audits. Suspicious emails forwarded anonymously. A press inquiry that came from nowhere. By the time Richard's PR team tried to contain it, Horizon's stock started to slide. Investors panicked. And for the first time, I saw that same polished executive, the man she'd chosen for wealth, sweating in front of cameras. Meanwhile, I stayed silent. Attending every meeting, listening as board members debated what to do about the CEO. I didn't have to suggest his removal. The world did it for me. When Richard's contract was terminated, she stood behind him, jaw tight, eyes burning with disbelief. She'd built her status on his success, and now it was gone. The day after the announcement, she came to my office without an appointment. I was reviewing expansion reports when the door opened, and there she was, standing in the same red dress, though it looked heavier now. She didn't speak right away. Neither did I. Finally, she said, "You planned this." I leaned back. "No, you did." "I just gave gravity a gentle push." Her voice trembled, somewhere between anger and pleading. "I never hurt you." I smiled, and not cruelly but truthfully. "You didn't have to. You just taught me what people do when they think they'll never face the mirror." Her eyes flickered. Maybe guilt, maybe memory. And then she asked the question she came for. "What do you want from me?" It was the simplest answer I'd ever given. Nothing. I already got it, because in that moment, I saw what I'd been chasing all along, not revenge, not redemption, but that single second when the person who broke your life realizes you rebuilt it without them. She left quietly, and I watched her reflection disappear in the glass door, just like she once vanished from my family's life. That evening, I visited my mother's grave for the first time in years. The same quiet hill, the same breeze that carried the scent of pine and distance. I knelt, brushed off the dust from her nameplate, and said softly, "They finally remembered you, Mom. Even if it was through me." The sun dipped low, painting everything gold. And for the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It felt peaceful. Because revenge, I learned, isn't about taking something back. It's about never letting what broke you define who you became. End title card for YouTube outro. She wanted a life of luxury. I built one, just not for her. Weeks passed after that meeting. No explosions. No headlines. Just the quiet collapse of things that were never real. Richard sold his shares and moved away. The woman who once sat beside him at every gala, who mocked me for thinking small, started fading from every picture that used to feature her smile. It wasn't instant ruin and just erosion, the kind that happens when truth slowly eats away at lies. One evening I was locking up the garage, my first business, the one I'd built before all of this, when I saw her standing there again. No driver, no designer purse. Just her clutching a paper envelope. "Please," she said. "I just want to talk." I nodded, mostly out of curiosity. We sat on an old bench outside the garage. She opened the envelope, old photos. My mom, my dad, her. The affair. Proof that they'd laughed at my mother's pain while pretending she didn't exist. She whispered, "I didn't know she'd die that night. I thought we'd just scare her." For a second, I forgot how to breathe. She started crying, not for my mother, I think, but for herself. And I realized then she wanted forgiveness, not because she regretted what she did, but because she couldn't live with the person she'd become. I stood up. "You don't need to explain," I said quietly. The universe already handled it. Her eyes widened, confused. But I was done explaining. I left her there, sitting beneath a flickering streetlight, clutching the ghost she'd created. That night, it rained. Not a heavy storm, just enough to blur the city lights into streaks of gold and blue. I drove to the hill where my mother rested. The same hill where my father was finally buried months later. Funny thing, he died alone in a hotel abroad. Heart failure, they said. No one claimed the body for days. I stood between their graves, 2 names carved into stone, 2 stories intertwined by betrayal. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. "Just balance," I said. "Mom, you were right. Time doesn't heal everything, and it just teaches you what matters." Then I left the envelope on her grave. The wind caught the edges, lifting one photo into the air. My mom smiling, oil stains on her hands, grease on her cheek, standing beside me as a kid. She'd always said real work leaves marks worth wearing. As I walked back to my car, I realized revenge hadn't brought peace. Understanding had, and maybe that's the part they never tell you. Revenge doesn't end when the other person falls. It ends when you stop waiting for them to notice you won, because some ghosts don't haunt you. They protect you, just quietly from the other side. Call to action. Narration. If you stayed till the end, maybe you've carried your own kind of silence too. Hit like, share this story with someone who's ever been betrayed, and subscribe, because not all revenge is loud. Some just echo forever.